Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of December. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with Donetsk. Today this is the focal point of this special operation of the clashes and this conflict these days. As you can see, the Western sources map shows at least like one icon, meaning that Ukrainians attack Donetsk with shells, with artillery systems and so on. Also, if you take a look at the Western sources map, you see at least three icons, red icons with AK-47, meaning that the Russians made at least three attempts of offensive operation, at least in these three directions: direction of Krasnogorovka, direction of Nivolska, and in direction of Pervomaiska. Furthermore, there are two icons of the rockets, over Marinka and over Novomikhailivka. So this is the story that we can achieve from the Western sources map. But if we take a look at the Russian sources map, we see the same picture but more detailed. First of all, today we can say that Donetsk is under very heavy fire, and to tell the truth, I don't remember the day like today. The Ukrainians attacked Donetsk with rockets for more than 3 times in a row. They haven't done such thing before. Usually they attack just once using the Grad systems or something like this, but today they attack and they're ruining Donetsk for 24 hours without any pause, without any even giving it time to rest or to, like, I don't know, to take the bodies from the streets and something like this. Donetsk is under very heavy fire, and the question is, why is that? Why is the Ukrainians so aggressive and active today? And the answer to this question is very simple. The answer to this question we can find in Marinka. If you take a look at this map, you see some icons in this area. The first one, that the white soldier with the Ukrainian flag shown with the arrow to the northwest part, means that Ukrainians are stepping back, are retreating. If we take a look at the south icon, soldier with the Russian flag with the arrow showing that the Russians have some progress in this direction. Furthermore, there was some updates from the south part of Marinka, some kind of videos and so on. But this is the picture that doesn't tell us anything. But today, this evening, we got the first update, the first report, I don't know, the first confirmation of the fact that Marinka has fallen. And the Ukrainians were forced to leave Marinka for 100%. The Russians established control over entire Marinka. Of course, it's very difficult to measure Marinka because, for example, as you can see, there are a lot of streets, a lot of blocks, and if the Russians establish control of this part of Marinka, can we tell that the Marinka has completely taken by the Russian? I believe we can, because it's like almost like entire Marinka, just a few blocks on the west that doesn't change anything. I'm not saying that the Russian control like this, but today we got the first report that the Russians established the entire control, that they pushed the Ukrainians back, and now they're doing some kind of clearing operation, which will take around 2, maybe 3, or maybe 4 days. I believe that these days the Ukrainians will make some kind of counter-offensive operation, trying to return control over Marinka or to enter in this town, or just to win some time, because these hours the Russians are saying that Ukrainians try to prepare some kind of fast defense line around Pobeda, and these days the Russians attacks Pobeda from at least 3 sides: from the north, from the Red territory, from Marinka as well, because the Ukrainians understand if they are not able to stop the Russians, to hold the Russians in Pobeda, we can send that entire front line from Novomikhailivka to Konstantinovka. This area will be automatically collapsed, and a lot of Ukrainian soldiers might got encircled in this area. So I believe that millions of citizens from Donetsk People Republic were waiting for these events since the 2014, because the Ukrainians were using Marinka as the main bridgehead to attack and to shell, to navigate the Ukrainian artillery system, to reduce Donetsk to the ruins. And we see how aggressive the Ukrainians these hours, the central part where no army, no military, just the regular I don't know, civilian objects, residential area. The Ukrainians tried to attack, and a lot of casualties. We discussed about that since the previous 2 weeks. There were around 100 people killed and something around 20 people wounded, just civilians. And to take Marinka is a very big progress for the Russians, because from the Ukrainians don't have reserves. They don't have reserves. They don't have free hands. They don't have army to, I don't know, to stop the Russians in this area, and the Russians will develop. And I believe that the next 2 days or 3 we are going to receive reports from Minister of Defense about Marinka. And now the main important town for Ukrainians is Pobeda. But if you take a look at this small village, this is not Ugledar. This is a small residential area with small buildings, and I believe that the Russians will just reduce till, I don't know, till grass, I don't know, till ruins this town. They will just make a field. I don't think that the Russians will try to take control. They don't need this village. The only town the Russians need is Konstantinovka. The town that located on the south from Marinka. There is a very important cross, as you can see, the road that moves to from Novomikhailivka to Kurakhova and from Marinka to Ugledar. So this is one of the most important area these days. And if the Russians understand it, they are able to establish control over this cross, the entire south front line from Ugledar, Novomikhailivka will be collapsed, and then we're going to see completely different story, completely different war, and the Russians will be able to penetrate. And I believe that these days Russian forces in Pavlovka, Shevchenkovo are sitting on their position, and the only thing they expect is in order to start offensive operation on Ugledar. I don't think that the Russians will give this order tonight or tomorrow, because I believe that they still need some time to clear Marinka, to demine, to establish their own fire position, and to establish something like this, to create this line, like that everything that on the right side of this line the Russians need to be 100% sure that they can control, that they can attack, they can spot enemy on the left side of this area, and after that they will start offensive operation in direction of Konstantinovka, Novomikhailivka, and of course in direction of Ugledar. So maybe it's very possible that this attack in the south of Donetsk is going to be the main and the focal attack, like the most vital attack from the Russian side. And if the Russians are able to penetrate the south of Ukraine, believe me, they will be able to develop their offensive operation very far to the north, maybe in direction of even Pavlograd. And I believe that maybe we are going to be the witnesses of this special attack or something like this. If we are talking about the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, they reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost around 50 soldiers, something around 4 armored vehicles, and around 3 commandos in this area who were trying to attack the Russian position near Novomikhailivka, Mykolska, Pavlovka, near Vremivka tactical bridgehead, and so on. So this is a very nice update for the Russians. Finally, they got control of Marinka. I believe that I just expect for maybe a week, not more than a week, and then we will see the update of the map. The Russian will color this. We're gonna receive the flag of the Russians and so on. Now they need to do some clearing operation, and of course, don't forget that as soon as Marinka falls, now the Russians need. I believe that the next 3 days or 4 days we're going to receive more updates about Nivoyska, because Marinka is, of course, it's great, it's nice update, very important area, but don't forget about Krasnogorovka. This is another Ukrainian fortification, and it's even maybe more fortified than Marinka, because Marinka, as you can see, it's a part of Donetsk, and it's not an easy job sometimes to fortificate this area. But if we're talking about Krasnogorovka, there is some distance between the Russian position and Ukrainian, so it's also important one. And the Russians now need to take this to concentrate, to focus on this area as well, but without Nivoyska and without Peromaiska, it's highly unlikely that the Russians are able to do something in this area. So I expect that the next few days we are going to receive some updates from Peromaiska and Nivoyska. The Russians will be activated in this area by their commanders, because we understand that as soon as Marinka falls, now the Russians need to do something with Krasnogorovka. And we discussed this situation many times, and the Russians need to cut supply road and to encircle, and I believe that the Russians will force the Ukrainians to leave this area, or they will be encircled. In this situation of entire collapse of South Donetsk front line, I believe that the Ukrainians will choose an option to be encircled in this area. I don't think that it's like I don't think that they need to. The Ukrainians are keeping there not more than 1,000 soldiers, even less, I believe. So it's not the number that they will count. And from another hand, these 1,000 soldiers, Ukrainians who can be encircled, get into small cauldron, might win some time or maybe another month for the Ukrainians in this battle. And it's these days, every single day is very important, and if we're talking about months, it's also very big importance, because meanwhile the Russians will pay another month to take Krasnogorovka. Maybe something interesting might happen around Bakhmut, and maybe the Ukrainians will be able to break the situation there. So of course I believe that we're going to see another tragedy in Krasnogorovka, because most of fortification in this area have fallen, like Peski, Pervomayska, Nivolska, Marinka, maybe Konstantinovka. So we will see another tragedy from the Ukrainian side in Krasnogorovka, I believe so. So now we are moving to the north, to the Bakhmut, Donetsk front line. Today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported or included this information about Yakovlevka. They reported that today the Russians established the final 100% control over Yakovlevka. If you remember, we got this update a few days ago. First we got update like from the ground, from soldiers, then from some military experts who's on the ground, and today we got like the third confirmation of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. I believe that Marinka will be the same story. Today we got the first update, then from military experts, from the forces on the ground, and I believe that by the end of the next week we're going to receive some updates from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. And the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours the Ukrainians lost around 40 soldiers, something around 5 armored vehicles around this area. The Ukrainians made few attempts of counter-offensive operation near Podgorodne. As you know, the Russians tried to storm this area and tried to encircle the Ukrainians from the north and to cut the road that supplies Solidar through Krasnogora. But the Ukrainians made their own counteroffensive operation. That attack was repulsed. The same story in the east part of Bakhmut. There were very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians tried to make some kind of counter-offensive operation. Very interesting updates are coming from Azaryanovka, Kurdyumovka, from this area. If you remember, yesterday we discussed the situation that the Russians managed to establish some their own bridgehead on the let's say left side of this canal. They established some position there. They got control over some fortification, like this fortification, but later we got update that Ukrainians uses HIMARS rockets, and they ruined this fortification with the Russians, and then they published video of killed Russians in the trenches, and the Russians were forced to step back. So the Russians lost control, or at least they lost some part of this bridgehead on this side of the canal. So we expect for more updates. Let's wait a little bit. I believe that anyway the Russians will be able to develop, but now we understand that this is not an easy job, and trenches is not a solution to hide from the HIMARS attacks. So we'll see. And of course, the Russians also reported and gave another report about Klishchiivka. These days, this update we received yesterday in the evening. As you can see, there is a railroad rocket, this one, and when we started this special operation, we remembered that the most difficult barrier for both sides were rivers, and by winter, by autumn, we can add another barrier for both sides is railroad and road rocket. So it's very difficult for parties to cross these rockets. And the recent battles and the recent clashes from both sides shows that it's not an easy job to cross rocket. This is the first rocket near Bakhmut, and if we're talking about the Ukrainians, don't forget that they also can't cross the railroad rocket near Nivolska, near Novoselovska, near Kuzyumovka, so it's not an easy job to cross rockets. And the Russians attacked along the rocket. near Klishchiivka, and also some Russian sources reported that the Russians managed to take control over the north part of Klishchiivka. So like something like this. So that means it's true, because it was just one source who confirmed this information. Maybe it was some kind of commandos or scouts or something like this. But anyway, if this information is true, and I believe that the next days we're going to receive some report, that means that Klishchiivka has been cut off from Bakhmut, and now there are no like stable supply safe roads that Ukrainians are able to use to move reinforcement to Klishchiivka, and the only possible solution to supply and support Klishchiivka is using fields and very low quality roads. Maybe this part of winter it is possible to use to supply and support Klishchiivka through the north from Ivanovsk, maybe, but if the temperature is going to rise, let's say it will be going to see some plus in Celsius, that means that the Ukrainians from that moment won't be able to use this area, at least to move some tanks or armored vehicles, because they will stuck in the mood in this area. So that's why if it's true about this establishing physical control over this road, I believe that now we can start counting days before entire Klishchiivka is going to fall. And of course, this is going to be another bad story for the Ukrainians, because from Klishchiivka there are no more towns or villages in front of Chasov Yar and Bakhmut, and the road that connects Chasov Yar and Bakhmut will be cut off as well. But of course, it's a nice story, but without taking control over Podgorodny, it's not like the real success story. Anyway, the Russians need to take Klishchiivka and to get as close as possible to Podgorodny and Krasnaya Gora. So I believe that the next week we're going to see these stories as well. If we are talking about Kupiansk and Liman Frontline, from this area we received some updates from this area as well, and but there were no heavy clashes, there were no offensive operation from the Ukrainian side. I mentioned that during the previous 2 weeks the Ukrainians haven't made even any attempt to start any counteroffensive operation. The only thing they do is just trying to concentrate some forces. Those forces were and are spotted by the Russians, and then the Russians start heavy artillery fire over these forces, and as a result of such attacks, the Ukrainians lost around 85 soldiers and something around 6 armored vehicles. The Russians attacked the Ukrainians near Kislovka. The Russians attacked the Ukrainian forces, their reserves near Stelmakhovka. There was some update from the area on the west side from Svatove, about 30 killed Ukrainian forces, like maybe some kind of commandos that Ukrainians were trying to send in the direction of Svatove. If we're talking about Chervonopopovka, the Ukrainians, maybe this is the only place where the Ukrainians tried to make some kind of offensive operation that were successfully repulsed by the Russians. Furthermore, there was some video confirmation of destroyed tanks and something like this from the Ukrainian side. So to underline everything, I understand and we see that the front lines slowly, step by step, but are collapsing. And I'm not saying that it's like that we can that this story has ended. Of course, it's not. We don't know the losses from the Russian side. Nobody knows which price the Russians paid for Yakovlivka, what price the Russians paid to cut Klishchiivka from Bakhmut. Nobody knows what price the Russians paid to take Marinka. Nobody knows, and who knows, maybe that was the last forces. It's not, of course, it's not like this, but anyway, at this stage of special operation, towns, streets, it doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters at this stage of operation is the number of the forces and the strategical points that this or that party controls. About strategical points, I mean let's point like Yakovlivka. For example, if you take a look at Yakovlivka, you're gonna see that this is road rocket, and the Russians were trying to cross this road rocket since the May. As soon as Popasna fell, the Russians were trying to cross this rocket, but they couldn't do this. So this strategic point that the Ukrainians were able to keep for more than a half a year, and it's like very important. So at this stage of the war, even Bakhmut doesn't matter, even Marinka doesn't matter. Marinka matters just as from the point of view of strategic points. So it's a very important area, and as soon as the Russians were able to take Marinka, they achieve some kind of operational square to move to the south, to collapse the south front line, to make a small, like, to penetrate the Ukrainian defense orders and try to develop and to force the Ukraine to step back almost till Pokrovsk. Nobody, Pavlograd or Pokrovsk, like this, to encircle Avdiivka. So the number of the forces and strategical points. And as you can see, the Ukrainians during the previous week lost at least 2 strategical points, or maybe more. They lost Yakovlivka near Solidar, the Ukrainians lost Marinka, and all these strategic points is very important. The entire front line relies on these strategic points, and to tell the truth, for now I don't know. I'm not sure what the Ukrainians are able to do, how they're going to fix the situation, where they're going to prepare another front line, because if Marinka really fell, believe me, the forces in Konstantinovka and Novomikhailivka, I believe they start packaging their stuff, and I believe that soon they will be forced to step back from this area, or they will be encircled or something like this. So we'll see. Let's follow this situation. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon. Have a good day. Bye bye.